Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast with Tanya Vasallo. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you that I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please rate, review, and share the podcast. And in exchange, and as my way to say thank you to you, I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. Welcome back to the Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And we are back with the amazing Lydia Knight. Welcome, Lydia.
Thanks for having me back. This is so fun to get to hang out again. And we always have such an amazing conversation.
I know. And if you're listening to Lydia for the first time, go back and search for her episode number. We've had so many amazing conversations. I've gotten to know you better, Lydia, through our podcast recording, through our networking group in town. And I'm excited for this particular episode of talking about your upcoming event. Lydia has an upcoming event, but share with us before we go into your event and different models of doing events and patriarchy and just doing more where we get to be collaborative instead of being competitive. I want us, in case our listener hasn't listened to you before, tell us a little bit about who you are, your journey, what your business is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the founder and CEO of the She Center. And so we specialize in executive coaching and leadership training for especially women in leadership and then also organizations making a difference. So we've done leadership training for leaders at Adobe and Disney and National Geographic. We most recently did leadership training for the US Army out at Fort Sill. So organizations doing great things in the world. And we truly believe, and we've seen so much evidence that when you uplift women in leadership, it's the key to so many things that all of us as organizations' missions want, and profitability and retaining people and attracting top talent. And the more diversity that you have, the better ideas that you have on your team. And so we really find the efficiency of uplifting specifically women in leadership. So that's what we do, what we specialize in. And we have programs and executive coaching, and we do live events. And we're going to talk about that and really dive into some interesting philosophy around live events and different approaches of doing them. But just a quick background, and I know that in our other episode, we take a deep dive into my story, but the She Center is in the top 2% of women-owned businesses in the world. And we celebrate that, and especially celebrating every single one of our journeys, because oftentimes the hard things, the challenges, the darkness in our lives can turn into some of our most incredible light, our most incredible gifts. So we have a top 2% in the world company. And I came from incredible poverty, could see the snow through the holes in the floor in our single wide trailer, running out of food. So that journey of there's just so much of that beautiful internal work that we get to do. And oftentimes it's prompted from the places we've come from. Like, I'm a cult survivor. I was, raised in very strict sort of fanatical, patriarchal religion as well. And to see that although those were hard beginnings, it prompted a journey, an adventure, if you will. And from that, of overcoming, unbrainwashing ourselves from things that are holding us back, that personal, that professional development, we get to create amazing things in the world. And we've seen that literally thousands of times. We've coached over 9,000 clients. So it's a joy to see our individual stories and so fun to celebrate all together. But that's like a quick little snapshot of who we are in the world.
That is amazing, Lydia, but I don't want to brush over it lightly because there were a couple things that you mentioned there. So for anyone that's listening, if you haven't listened to Lydia's previous episode, I just looked it up. It's number 80, and it's called Change Your Story, Change Your Life. And the reason why that's important, because what you're saying is, coming from a cult background, from harsh beginnings. And I think sometimes, would you agree that our pain can turn into those dark moments, can turn into that light? Because becoming top 2% company and the world. That is a pretty amazing accomplishment, of just saying, wow, like I came from these beginnings, but I was able to process it. I'm brainwashed myself because I want to go there too and shift things. So I'm just shining some light on this, Lydia, because I think all of us, sometimes we could either choose to stay in our story, in our limiting story of where we come from, the things that have happened to us, how hard it's been for us, versus saying, you know what? Yes, these things happen to me, but let me write a new story for myself. And what do I want to shift, or what do I want to change? So, talk to me a little bit about how you did that, because that goes hand in hand about shifting the models of how things have been done with events before. But I want to see how you, or I want to hear a little bit about how you came to terms of, I'm brainwashing you. I just love that term, of whether that was with the cult or with your upbringing, of saying, you know what, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, at what point that you realize that that's not the only way you could live, and that you get to choose and create your destiny?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And what I would challenge is that everyone listening right now to think of a challenge that you're going through in your life right now, and to first just give yourself lots of compassion for how difficult that is, and that your feelings are valid, and that you are, worthy of feeling whatever is there presently. And then with curiosity, just pay attention to the story that you're telling yourself about it. Is it a story of injustice and this is not fair and this is why I can't? Or is it a story of, and this is a question that we use with our clients all the time, and it's so powerful to ask yourself, what is the best possible outcome? So, of the challenge that is happening right now, what could be the best possible outcome? And when I look back at my own story and, put it in that frame of like, I grew up in poverty, what could be the best possible outcome? Building a seven-figure business, coaching 9,000 clients, like, all right, if that's the best possible outcome, and I know it keeps on getting better, right? But what might I do? What actions might I take? How would I show up? Who would I need to be a match to that best possible outcome and no longer a match to my current circumstances? So, what it really is that, and this is what I'm going to be speaking at our upcoming event. So, the neuroscience of leadership, which is who we are, is very much about our identity and the actions that we're taking. So, there's this feedback loop of this is what I see myself doing. So, this is who I must be. Well, this is who I must be. So, I'm going to be doing the things that match to that. But the root of all of that is the thought patterns, the habits of thought that lead up to that. So when you know how to bring into awareness, what is the story? What are the thought patterns that are leading up to those actions that are creating that identity? And you are able to shift it at that level where you're changing your thought patterns, you can become anyone you need to be that matches anything you want to do in the world. And the beautiful thing about that is that the very best work, the purpose, the reason that you're here in the world, the reason that you are alive is so connected to your authenticity. So when you get to an authentic place and you're able to sort through all of the limiting thought patterns, then your authenticity rises through that and it connects you to your purpose. And so that's really a big piece of what I would suggest focusing on for, changing your story, is realizing it's just a habit that you can break. It's a habit that you can change with the way that you think.
That is fabulous. And thanks for just that little snippet. I mean, that's a golden nugget right there. That's worth everything from what you're listening here. So tell us a little bit about this upcoming event, and why is it different? Like, what's your emphasis? What are you wanting to do differently with this event coming up in October?
Yeah. So there's an interesting stat that I've been studying over the past few days. I don't know if you've heard of the book Invisible Women, but it's fascinating. And it's just really straightforward statistics of how we live in a world that was not created for women. So here's a wild and true part of that. There has never been safety testing in cars for women. All of the safety features, all of the ways that cars are designed are based off of men, which means that as a woman, if you get in a car accident, you are 17% more likely to die and 73% more likely to be seriously injured just because you are a woman and safety has not been designed for you in cars, which is insane to me.
It really is. That's crazy.
Like, think of how many women are out there driving and driving their kids and driving, to commutes to work and buying cars. Like, it's one of these things where you look at that, and it's just one small example of how the world has not been designed for women. And so, with our focus of women in leadership, it's so important because we create a world that's better for everyone when we have more women in the driver's seat, like when we have more women making the decisions and in leadership. So, Women Lead Live is not only about uplifting women in leadership to make a better world for all of us, but it's about having a place that's an event that's designed in a better way, that's not designed in the old patriarchal model, that's designed not only for women, but is going to be this new leadership, this upcoming leadership. And we see it all over. You see it all over where people are wanting something new, where people are wanting something better, where people are craving that in-person connection and that authenticity. And that's really what we're bringing. So yes, it's an event uplifting women in leadership, but it's also the whole event is designed in a very different way in this new wave of what we call centered leadership.
So let's talk a little bit about that, Lydia, because I'm very curious. It's so funny that you're saying it. I'm definitely getting this book, Invisible Women. There was another podcast episode with Kate Ngu where she talks about our cycles as women. It's how the cycles for men are 24 hours. And that's why the working day was 9 to 5, because they cycle, they go their ups, their downs, like when they have the most energy, they need a nap halfway through the day, like whereas women, we don't need that as much. So, and then she compares the cycle of men with the cycle of women and how the workplace and it just hasn't been created equally for women. Some companies are starting to give off some days off for when you have your menstruals, like when you're at the part of you're menstruating. And it's proven scientifically too, where women will want to retreat, during her cycle when she's menstruating versus when she's ovulating, that she has like a gazillion more energy than when she's at a period where she's just wanting to retreat, where she's wanting to be inward, where she's wanting rest. And so I find this fascinating that you're focusing on recreating the format of events. I've learned about how to design your events, my 3-day events. I've been doing it for over 7 years. And I have been tweaking things throughout the process because even though I've learned most of the ways of how to create this event model has been from women, I think a lot of things have also been handed down from the way men create events. Again, and it's not any of our fault. It's more because patriarchy's been set up that way, and women, we've just adapted to what this male energy and paying attention to the cycles of men versus how do we want to do our events as, in a more feminine way. And I'm not talking about femininity, with men versus women. I'm just talking about the energies of like bringing in more female energy, which is collaboration versus competition, where it's nurturing and creativity versus push, go, stay at the event until midnight, 12 hours of events, like Tony. And it's wonderful. I know Tony Robbins events. I still haven't been to any of his live events, but I'm sure they're fascinating. They're amazing. You're all pumped up. But I know that you can also come up of an event all pumped up without having to be there 12 hours and running your adrenals, to the ground. So can we talk a little bit about that and what your vision is, Lydia, of this new model of events infused with more feminine energy to them?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can think of it in terms of feminine and masculine and patriarchy, and all of that can be useful to look at. But a main focus that we want to bring into the spotlight is what works, like what's in alignment with the authenticity of how we do best, right? Like coming home from an event, absolutely exhausted, needing to recover, feeling overwhelmed, feeling not good enough, like being beat down in something. It's like, that's just not effective. Like you're not going to be creating amazing things in your life from that energy, right? And so just paying attention to how you feel. And, we've just done this through the cycle of lots and lots of events of how can we continue to adjust this to serve people best? So one focus, just in contrast, I'm not saying that all other events are this way, right? But it's interesting that we've gotten a really behind the scenes look at how some of these, names that you would know, very big events are run, because we've had quite a few people from those big companies come, they leave that company and they come to our company. They want to work with us because we do things differently. And it is just fascinating and a bit discouraging to see that behind the scenes look. So one thing that we know from those who we've interacted with that have come to us and wanted to be on our team is that a big focus at some of these events based off of the old model is the bottom line of what is going to get people to buy. So it's not actually about the event or the value that is delivered at that event. It's about how do we get people in a room so that they will buy at the end. And there are a couple of things that have been shown to be effective for that. So one, people's blood sugar being low and being very worn out. People are more likely to make a purchase if they're exhausted, if they haven't had a break all day, if they've had these big emotional ups and downs. So if you go to an event, there's like, lots of hype, lots of emotional things. And, breakthroughs and feeling emotions are wonderful and transformative. But when that's like artificially created as something to the means of, so that you'll go to the back of the room and you'll buy, it's a manipulation, essentially. And so going from that model of how do we get people to buy at the end, and although there are going to be beautiful things at the event, like we have our speakers and we have lots of ways to serve people and people want to keep working with us when they come to an event, but we go from the vantage point of, you know what you need. We're going to let you know what's available and we're going to see your highest self. You know what you need. You're going to choose it and you don't need to be pressured and you don't need to be manipulated. Like we want your yes, we want your consent for what you are excited about next, instead of how do we create this environment because that's really looking at someone from a lower vantage point, right? Where it's like, you need to be controlled to do this thing we want you to do. Versus, here are your options, be nurtured, feel good. So that's one way that we contrast how we do things, where you stay nurtured, where you feel good, we take breaks. So we had a leadership certification event in Santa Fe about, a couple months ago. We're going to have another one in November. And it was just phenomenal. And these leaders, we had amazing leaders. We had a woman who's Forbes top 50 over 50. We had representation from all these amazing companies. And what they said over and over, along with like loving the certification, the event, is it felt so good. Like it felt more like a vacation. We're here and we're learning so much and it's deep learning, but the time went by so fast and I felt so rested and I felt so nourished and I'm hydrated and I'm eating good food and I like feel wonderful. And we believe and we have seen that there's a higher level of learning when you're nurtured versus push through, burn the midnight oil, have all the hype, feel overwhelmed, and feel like you need someone to save you. It's like, no, you're good, you're strong. How can we partner together? So a couple things to look at.
That is so beautifully said and explained so that we can leave that model of feeling manipulated and pushed into something and being able to come back to, no, what do I want to get out of here? We're going to take a quick pause and I want to talk about intention with this, Lydia. Thank you. Hi there, I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcast, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. You can also find other free goodies in the show notes. Go check them out. So let's go back. We're talking about, you were just mentioning just feeling manipulated versus feeling nurtured, or feeling, like where your emotions, where they're dragging you. I mean, you will go through emotions at an event, if it's an authentic event or inauthentic, you're still going to be able to go through your emotions. But how do I react to it, and making purchase and decisions, whether it's there is a purchase or not, or taking it to the next level, but knowing that you're doing it from a place where you feel empowered and not feel manipulated or forced or cornered into something. Can you talk to us a little bit about intention, or how should we go into these types of events, so that we can have our radars up and knowing like, oh, am I coming into an event that's gonna, push, 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 and I'm gonna feel cornered at the end, or am I coming into an event where I'm feeling nurtured? Like, let's talk a little bit about setting an intention going to this type of events, and anything else that you might see might be helpful when we go to this sort of, like any type of events. Now we're doing a lot more in person, after COVID. So I think these are things that are important, especially if you're investing money for travel, for staying at a place, and picking wisely, I'd say, as you're going to these events.
Yeah. So I think first to celebrate the investment of yourself in time and financial investment, oftentimes the value and the breakthrough of the event that you're going to starts when you make the decision of your worthiness. When you make the decision of, I'm going to set aside this time because I am important. I am treating myself like someone I love. I am treating myself like someone who is important because you are, and your actions are matching that. And so just to celebrate the decision that is made is a wonderful place to start. And especially at our event that is for women in leadership, what we find, and because we've done so much executive coaching over the years, is that women are so productive and they're so focused and they're so hardworking. And oftentimes we'll go into an event of like, I want to get absolutely everything out of this, and I'm going to be productive the whole time, and I'm going to take all the notes. And that's wonderful. And if that feels authentic to you, then great. But what I would really coach people to do when setting an intention is to set an intention of trust that you are going to get exactly what you need just because good things come to you. Because oftentimes we have it, especially as women in leadership, we have this big connection of, I can only have good things happen if I have an incredible amount of effort behind it. And it's like, well, yes, and is that the story you want to tell about everything? What if you have magic happening in your life? What if you have these incredible connections when you enjoy it, when you're authentic, when you open up, when you let the magic happen? And I find that those who, and this is something that we'll coach people going into an event, especially people who are already in our community, of allow yourself to enjoy and be delighted and to be flexible so that you can just enjoy the magic and build that trust, build that new story of like, oh, I'm going to get exactly what I need, and I don't have to over effort for it.
I love that word, over effort, because what's coming to mind for me is FOMO, the fear of missing out. Talk to us about that, Lydia, because I do feel like a lot of people, I myself included, I've gone to events where it's like, well, I already invested all this time, money, energy, into coming here, thousands of dollars, my time, because then when I go back, I have to take care of my daughter to make up for the time that my husband was watching her for those 3 days, and so there is a little bit of that, as you were saying that, of that FOMO, of like, I have to be at every talk. I've gotten much better with the years, like I've been going to events and retreats for, I don't know, maybe a decade now, and I've gotten much better. But for anyone that maybe hasn't gone to events, that haven't invested in themselves, what can you say about FOMO, and just maybe reiterate it? I know that, as we repeat, that's how we create new thought patterns and
Mhm.
habits of thinking, so that we're not missing out on an event, even if we missed the luncheon, or we got there, I don't know, you're feeling tired that morning and you decide not to come to the morning breakfast, and start at the regular hour or something. Talk about FOMO and how can we get over this?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to look at. So I think that it's important if we're talking about the fear of missing out to talk about perfectionism. Because the idea of perfectionism is, well, if I can't do it perfectly, then I won't do it at all. And a lot of times we'll go in one, like we'll have this pendulum where we're swinging to one side or the other, where we go into the event and we're like, we're going to do everything and it's going to be perfect. And I'm going to meet all the right people. I'm going to make all the right connections. I'm going to take all the notes. And then when we feel overwhelmed and like we'll fall short, then we end up being out in the hall and looking at our phone and, like, oh, well, we're going to linger longer here and not come in because we'll actually disconnect when we can't feel like we can do it perfectly. So part of overcoming this fear of missing out is overcoming perfectionism, as in putting your focus on being present. So we'll even find this because this is going to be incredible networking. It's going to be like structured and intentional networking, probably not like people are used to, where you will be known and you will get to know other people. And it's always great to have people on your list that you want to meet there. It's going to be an amazing group of women in leadership. And oftentimes we can have this chatter go through our minds when we're talking to one person of a fear of missing out. Because if you're talking to one person, then you're not talking to that person, this other person. It's this opportunity cost of like, well, am I talking to the best person to be networking with right now? And a great anchor to come back to over and over during the event is, am I being present with where I'm at right now? So at the event, if taking a bunch of notes is actually keeping you from being present and connected with what you need to get from the speaker, set down your pen. If it helps you to be more present to take notes, then do that. But when you're talking to someone, be present with that person. Because when we are divided, when we have that split focus of, well, I have a fear of missing out on this thing over here, so I'm not being really present in this, then we're not present in anything we're doing. And that depth and being present is actually the most valuable thing. That's where the magic gets to happen. That's where you get to find out that there is incredible value with whoever you're connected with. So show up and be present is the most important thing. And it's also a very restful state. When we keep on bringing ourselves back to presence, it's almost like a meditation that can be thought of as a mindfulness practice of, when I experience the FOMO coming up, I'm going to bring myself back to being present, being nurtured, enjoying, being in the delight, being in the magic. And so you get to write yourself a new story in that, and then look for evidence of how it's serving you. Wow, I was present with this person and I did get what I needed.
This is fabulous. Do you have a particular story of yourself where maybe you were in that place of either attending an event or you were leading one of your events where you were more in this maybe left side of the brain, more of the controlling, the organized, it has to be like this and it has to be like that? Because I've spoken with other leaders, where they're actually one of the clients was telling me this last week. She's like, and we did this and it wasn't going how I had planned it out, even though it was still going great. And I'm like, but you missed the opportunity of magic right there, because, but the good thing is that you were aware. Do you have any stories that you can recall, Lydia, of whether you were attending an event and you got pulled out of that magic, or that you were overly planning or got caught up in the, oh my God, it has to go this way and it's not. And then you were able to pull away from it and realize, like, tell us a story of this sort, whether it was attending an event or leading one.
Yeah. Oh, there are so many stories like this. So, in case it's not clear, the reason that we do our executive coaching and coach on ending burnout and overcoming perfectionism and being present in your life is because these are all things that I have personally overcome. Like when I started going to events, I was a health coach and I trained other health coaches. So when I started my health coaching business, I ended up training over 400 other health coaches. So I became a business coach for health coaches, and we would do these big events, like huge events, like thousands of people. And so, 14 years ago is when I started going to these, really big events. And I just remember, I mean, like, I was very hyped up, but like miserable. It was like a very energetic misery, right? I had an eating disorder at the time. And so I was trying to like control all of my food the whole time and looking at the clock and figuring out all of that. I was also trying to manage all of these people on my team and do all of this networking and, help and support all of the leadership that was there because we had these huge events. And I would just get so burnt out at those events, but there's also this sort of high to it where you go, and although you're burning out, you're like burning out with sparks, right? Where there's this energy where you're just popping around and you're doing everything. And then you come back and there's like this depression, like this lull after the event where you've been so energetic and been on such a high. And then you come back and there's just this drop where you feel sort of desperate and where you feel sort of not enough and where you're questioning, all of the things that you did or said or whatever. And so, yeah, I would say that it was that experience and just the contrast to that, which is so, so important. So, yeah, and that's the story of a lot of events that I attended early on, of noticing the low afterward and seeing a need for having events just be. Sometimes you can have a scarcity around it, right? It's like, I never do anything for myself. So I'm going to go to this event and it's going to be like my one golden token that I get in the whole year, the next 10 years. And to just normalize it. I'm going to this event because that's who I am. I'm someone who's committed to professional and personal development. And that can just help even things out where you're like, this is a gift that I'm giving to myself now and moving forward. And so notice where it just starts evening out, where there isn't the big high and the big low, where you go and have a breakthrough and then you keep momentum afterward because there isn't that drop. And that's something you'll notice. And yeah, so that was my experience early on many times.
Yes, I feel as you were explaining it, I feel like I could have feel completely identified with that, of just certain events of just like, I need a whole week to recover from this, of just what just happened here, like my head was still spinning and that energy and that space. So I completely get it. Talk to us a little bit about your event. Who is it for? And what's the name of the event, the dates, and all these things coming up?
Yes, yes. So this is going to be our Women Lead Live in Denver, Colorado. It'll be October 4th, 5th, and 6th, 2024, depending on where you're listening to this. And if it's after that, then come and check and see when our next event is. But this is really an event that is for women in leadership, and everyone is included. So if you want to bring someone who is not a woman with you, wonderful. They're going to gain so much incredible value. But this is especially to nurture and uplift women who have that identity or are aspiring to that identity of leadership in their life. So yes, we're going to have lots of women, C-suites and executives and, women who have an official title of leadership. But I would also encourage you, because we're going to have moms there and we're going to have, people who are leading their communities, and we're going to have, people who are creating movements and people who have a desire to find purpose. So also, if you're aspiring to this identity of leadership, this is going to be an incredible space for us to all come together and really amplify what it means to be a leader. And I want to say huge congratulations, Tanya. You've been selected as one of our speakers at Women Lead Live. So it's going to be so fun to be on stage with you. Yes.
Yay! I'm excited. I'm excited for that. Thank you,
It's going to
Lydia.
be, and you'll, as having a podcast in the top 1.5%, you're going to be talking to us about amplifying women's voices. I'm going to be talking about the neuroscience of leadership. We have an incredible speaker, Jen Garcia. She's going to be talking about building social capital through AI. We're going to be talking about your leadership values and your authenticity and creating stories and introducing yourself in a way that represents you and your values and the story you're telling about you. It's going to be a phenomenal experience that is going to be exciting and fun and also very nurturing and specifically designed not only in the way we're doing the event, but the content for these incredible women in leadership to be coming away from that event as a higher level leader in not only their identity, but in their skills, and to be able to make the sort of connections and up level in the tools that they have to go to that next level of success in their lives, so that we have this big wave of influential women coming into that next level of their leadership, making a bigger difference in the world after the event. It's going to be really powerful. And we're going to stay connected. So we have an online portal where it's not just like you go when you meet someone and then you never see them again. It's like before the event, after the event, we have a community that everyone gets to be a part of where you can keep on nurturing those relationships.
That is fabulous. I'm so excited for it and just to see how you put your events on. I'm always so curious, of like meeting other amazing women in leadership, how this event is put on, the other speakers, just connections. I'm really, really excited about that. But I'm thinking right now, as we're speaking of this, Lydia, for anyone that's listening that doesn't consider themselves a leader, what is your definition of leadership?
I love that. So, what we teach and focus on is centered leadership, which means that you become centered yourself so that you can step up into centering your sphere, centering your world, making an impact. And so, what we see is the very best leaders are the ones that are centered themselves first. So if you don't yet have that, whatever you've been taught leadership is, where it's checking certain boxes, understand that you get to define leadership for yourself, that we are all leaders in some way in our life. And you may be at the stage of leadership where you need to center yourself first. And that's totally great. It's going to make you a better leader for the rest of your life when you focus on first centering yourself. So if you're not quite feeling like those big leadership vibes or that energy of like, I'm going to go out and change the world or lead a lot of people, that's totally great. And that might not even be for you or what you have a desire for. Or maybe you do have a desire for that and you just need to do some things first to feel more secure in that. There's no judgment. All of that, wherever you're at on that spectrum, is beautiful. But what you want to look at is, what is my next level of leadership? What is my next step? And if that's to come and center yourself, great. If that's to build better relationships with those around you, wonderful. If that's to, have a mission and change the world and connect to your purpose, wonderful. But own wherever you're at with your leadership. But my definition of leadership is true leaders, centered leaders are the ones who can fully focus on their mission and the people around them because they first centered themselves. So they're not acting in a way that has to do with their own wounds or their own background or their own insecurities, where they're steady. And so they can create that steadiness and that centeredness for those around them.
That's fabulous. And the reason why I was asking you is because I think sometimes we check ourselves out like, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me. Like she's talking about leaders, like in these huge companies that you were talking about, Adobe and Disney and all these other places. But to me, even a mom is a leader. It's like you are prepping little human beings to be amazing human beings and contributing to society and knowing how to move through the world. So that's why I asked you that question, so that if you are listening and you check yourself out and you're like, okay, well, this doesn't apply to me. Is this just for leaders in entrepreneurship or professional leaders too? Like, what kind of profile do you see of the people that tend to come into your world, and learn about leadership, Lydia?
Yeah, absolutely. So, some beautiful elements that we see, those who are attracted to our events, are people who want to make a difference, people who want to have a better world, people who have that heart to create a better environment for themselves and those around them. And that's a beautiful thing. And I would say that if that's the core of who you are, like if you want a better world, if you want a better world for you internally or a better world for those that you care about around you, like that is leadership. Leadership is leading the change. And that can come in lots of different forms. And like you said, again, when we go back to that, we are experiencing a world that was not created for women. Part of that is that what women have traditionally done and focused on in a patriarchal society is devalued. So, being a mother, being a nurturer, taking care, doing unpaid labor, taking care of, focusing on relationships, those things have been undervalued, but those are some of the most valuable things in the world. So, if there's any sort of internal experience, if you're listening and thinking, like, oh, well, I'm not a leader because I'm just, notice, is that really what you think? Do you think that being a mother is less valuable leadership than someone leading a company? And if so, do you agree with that? Or is that just the old habits of thought, the old, sort of patriarchal thought that has trickled down to you? And you can make a decision to change that and step into the value of the leadership that you are creating in the world, whatever you're doing.
That was so beautiful, Lydia. Thank you for that. How do we center ourselves? As you were talking about centering ourselves. I'm sure you'll share more at the event, but how do we get to center ourselves? Or what are some practices or things that you do in particular that we could use as an example?
Yeah, I love that. So, when we do our leadership certification and take a deeper dive into this, the two big areas that we look at is centering our thoughts and centering our heart, right? So, the mind and the heart. And we're going to be practicing that at Women Lead Live as well in ways to bring into awareness the thought patterns that we have and to just look and see, is that centered or is that not centered, right? Like, how is that creating an internal experience and to be able to shift that? So, one of the big first steps in being able to change our patterns of thought is to bring our thoughts into awareness because a lot of our patterns are just running throughout the day. They're literally habitual thoughts that aren't in our conscious minds. But when our prefrontal cortex, that's the part of our brain that looks at something in a way where it's in our awareness, it's not just running on habit. You can bring your thoughts that were out of your consciousness into your awareness. And just by doing that, you're already changing them because now you have lots of choice around it. So becoming centered through our thought and becoming centered through our emotions, because those are very connected. So a couple things that we'll be practicing at the event is bringing our thoughts into awareness and how to have a higher level thought. Comparing a thought that is not centered with a thought that is centered, right? So, like we talked about earlier, that thought of I'm not good enough and I have to do everything to, make up for the time that I'm missing at home and I have to justify this versus a centered thought where you're like, I'm worthy of this. I can relax and good things are going to happen. So having that comparison and making that shift. And then when it comes to our internal experience with our hearts, to bring our emotions into not only awareness, but to give them space. We've been taught so much to suppress, to push down our emotions, to operate on top of them, to experience them later, to not let people see. But the reason that we feel worried about our emotions oftentimes is that we've held them back so much that when they do express, they're in explosive ways where I've never ever cried in work before, but now I'm exploding with tears because I held it back for so long. But there are ways that you can fully experience your emotions in ways that are very appropriate in whatever world you're in, where it shows your authenticity, where I can feel these big and valid emotions and they add power to my message instead of making me, an outcast or making me embarrassed or whatever it is. So being centered with our mind and with our heart are some of the very biggest things to focus on. So we're going to be looking at that at Women Lead Live. We're going to have examples of that. It's going to be phenomenal, but that's really where centered leadership starts, centering ourselves in those two areas.
Thank you for that. We're going to take a last pause before we wrap up. Hi there, I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcast, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. You can also find other free goodies in the show notes. Go check them out. Thank you, Lydia, for that explanation of centeredness and how we can start becoming more aware of our thoughts and start shifting things. We can start doing it now before we even get to the event. I want to talk a little bit about collaboration versus competition, because this has come up between you and I and conversation. And I think it's the new way of how women leaders are emerging, instead of being all catty, like maybe it might have been, decades ago, and how patriarchy has set us up, of like, oh yeah, make them compete, or she's, a bitch, or, like it's just things are shifting. Tell us what you've been observing with that and how you're shifting that narrative and turning competition into collaboration.
I think that's such a great thing to focus on. Inherent in competition is scarcity. There's only so much, there's not enough for everyone. You better run to the back of the room before they're all gone. You better do this before the strike of midnight. You better get this before someone else does. And a lot of the purchasing patterns that we've been in are based off of that scarcity and that competition. And part of that competition is a hierarchy of, if you're going to do something with me, I have to press down everyone else, right? It's like, come and work with me because everyone else is horrible. Just to, give you an extreme of that. And we really reject that. Again, it's trusting the women that are there. It's like, you know what's right for you. You are going to find the path. You're going to connect with the coach that is right for you, or the program that's going to support you best. And although it's beautiful to give people incentives and gifts and like reasons to invest in themselves, like wonderful, to do that in a collaborative way. So instead of having an event where it's like, all right, we're going to get people into a room, we're going to create this structure. I mean, creating an event is a huge investment. And, the She Center is making that investment. But then we are bringing other people in and saying, you know what, we have this room, we have this stage, we have this beautiful event. Let's bring people in that are going to add value and have it be in a collaborative way where we are all adding. And because we're all adding to it, it's going to uplift everyone. So there's a certain trust in collaboration. There's Tanya, I'm inviting you in, and, Jen, I'm inviting you in, and our other speakers, and saying, we're going to work together to serve the women in that room. And we're going to trust that they are going to make incredible breakthroughs and the best decisions for them. But there's nothing about having to put anyone else down so that people do my thing instead of someone else's thing. It's like, we're going to trust the people there to do what is right for them. And to also have it be, especially with the gender wage gap, right? It's like women make 84 cents on the dollar of what men make in the same position. It's also important to bring ways for women to make income, to, make passive income, to create more income in their lives. And so what's beautiful about the way that we do events is like, we do a revenue share with ticket sales. With, if you bring people from your audience in, like, you are financially, we're sharing in that. So there are lots of ways that we look at how can we come together and be greater because we're all contributing, versus either keeping people out because we feel a scarcity, or if we invite people in, making sure that they're not focused on and only one person is focused on because they're like, the person that is wanting to be on top. I think that people are done with that. People are just really done with that energy. There's a trust where it's like, let's all come together and make things greater and have a high level of trust that everyone's going to do what is right for them. And we're just going to serve and know that it's all going to work out because we're coming together for one united mission.
Yes, I love that. And what I love too, that I've been practicing for many years and focused on that, is like how much business I've given to other colleagues and colleagues that have given business back to me, that then we turn into friendships, like throughout the years, with other women. And it's so fabulous, because I'm like, if I'm going to put my dollars, I want to put them into, supporting other women that are doing their business, that are trying to move forward with it. I love it. I love how you were explaining the trust aspect of it versus the scarcity mindset with these things. So thanks for that, Lydia. Well, tell us once again your dates. Where can people find? We'll put this in the show notes too. There'll be a link there so you can get a 10% discount, if you come through the podcast, So thank you, Lydia, for that. That's a collaboration right there, that I think is beautiful and fabulous. But tell us again the dates, the name of the event, the location, so that everyone can hear it, and just go to the show notes to click on the link.
Absolutely. So, all right, we're going to be in Denver, Colorado, right in the heart of the city. And it'll be October 4th, 5th, and 6th, 2024. When you go to the page, you'll see that we have special pricing, like for the hotel that we're going to be at in that space. So we'll have that for the next little while. There's a limited amount of spots there, but as long as there are some available, we've got special pricing there. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. There are lots of places to eat around, and we will all be there. There'll be lots of networking opportunities. On Friday night, we'll have a beautiful reception. On Saturday, we have all of the speakers. It's going to be an incredible lineup, very actionable, it's not like lecture style so much as in like we are going to be doing the work, really practicing the tools. And then for all of you who are getting VIP tickets, then we're going to be doing live executive coaching, and I'll be leading that on Sunday. So that'll be really beautiful for everyone who does the VIP option, which I encourage you. That'll be such a fun thing. There are lots of bonuses there. So if you go to the show notes, you'll be able to look at the link to get to the page with all of the details. You can get your tickets there. And then if you use the code, like Tanya was saying, Courage to Be, there's a coupon code for 10% off for all of you who are in this community, and it'll be beautiful to see you there. So that'll be another additional gift, but so, so fun. And if you go to, let's see, Tanya, the link should be, it's theshecenter.org/WLL for Women Lead Live /Courage to Be. And that's the link to go to. And then you can use the coupon code for the 10% off.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lydia. And before we wrap up, I like asking everyone this question. What can our listeners do to live a life with more courage?
I love that. One of the biggest pieces of coaching that we oftentimes start with for those who are committed to courage is to first have the courage for compassion toward yourself. Yeah, it's such an important piece because when you can start with compassion and curiosity, what it does is that it takes you out of judgment and it gives you some of the best solutions. So courage often starts with compassion and curiosity toward yourself, and to practice that emotional shift. That's what's on my mind for today, of something that has, I know, served so many of our clients and is a beautiful way to live and practice.
Thank you for that, Lydia. I will take that one with me too. We all can use compassion towards ourselves. So thanks for your time. I will see all of you that are interested in coming to the event. I'll see you up in Denver early October. And thanks for your time, Lydia. Once again, you are fabulous. I appreciate your time and your knowledge and sharing just your talents with the world. Thank you for what you're putting out there.
Thank you for having me on. What an absolute joy. And yes, so excited to see you guys there. It'll be so fun to all be there together in person. There's nothing like it.
Hi there. I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes, and all you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course.